this is specific to Bitcoin application. Other, coin applications might be using the similar algorithm, but this is for Bitcoin application. So what happens, if you remember, was every time a new block is created for the next block, or for the next series of blocks, right? Not just for next block. For a certain amount of time, let's say for 2 weeks, a puzzle with a certain target difficulty level. And how you adjust that difficulty level is another story. A puzzle with a certain difficulty level, and that difficulty level gives us an output of number of zeros that we should find. Okay, so we are going to look for a 256 long alphanumeric sequence of characters, and the first number of characters are all going to be 0. So that is the puzzle that we are trying to solve. So what we're going to do is we are going to use an integer. Let's say pick some integer. You can start from integer 0. We're going to put this integer into a hash function. Hash function, remember from last time, receives an input and then gives an output that is mapping the input to, in our case, 256 long set of characters. So it doesn't matter how long your input is. If your input is empty, if your input is 1 character long, or if your input is the entire encyclopedia of some encyclopedia, okay, or the entire library, doesn't matter. So regardless of the size of the input, the hash function that we are using here, which is using SHA and hash function, SHA, is always giving us an output of 256 bits long or characters long output. So our problem that we are trying to solve here is we are going to find an integer. When we put this integer into the hash function, okay, the output of this hash function is going to give us an output that is satisfying the target number of zeros at the beginning of the hash output. So if the target is 10 zeros, we are aiming at finding an integer n. When we insert this integer into the hash function will return a value which has 10 zeros at the beginning of the hash function value, which is 256 long alphanumeric characters. So that is, as simple as sounds, is very difficult. It sounds very simple, but solving this, finding this n is very, very difficult. I mean, when I say very difficult, if we are using brute force, there is no other way. I mean, finding this n value, we are simply using brute force, and every 2 weeks, the difficulty level is adjusted, means more number of zeros are required from us to find as a value, output value of the hash function, and it makes it more difficult to search because our search space is exponentially increasing. Right? So this is what the pseudocode for solving a hash puzzle. I just wanted to bring this to your attention. Whoever solves this puzzle first has the right to claim for the reward for creating the block. So that once you solve this hash puzzle, you have the right to claim for the reward, and that reward will be a couple of bitcoins, as well as any transaction fee that you collect from that block. Okay, so that will be your reward. All right, and this n value that you find, this integer that you found, right? We call this nonce value. Now, I didn't stop the review. I want to make sure that you guys are crystal clear about this. So I'm going to go through a video. So from time to time, I'm going to stop the video to ask you questions or maybe to make some explanations. But this video, I already put it into your folder, into the lecture notes folder. You can watch it later on if you like. It's very clear. It is available from MIT's website. You can check it yourself. But let me know if the voice is not clear, please.
This is a blockchain demo. We're going to do this in a very visual way, though. I'm going to make it very easy to understand by stepping through the key pieces of what a blockchain is in a visual way. But before we get started, we need to take a look at this thing that we call a SHA-256 hash. Okay, and a hash, this is one of them right here. A hash looks like a bunch of random numbers. And essentially what it is, it's a fingerprint of some digital data. And it just so happens it's the fingerprint of whatever I type in this box. So if I type my name, Anders, into this box, you see that the hash has changed. As a matter of fact, it changed every time I typed a letter, right? So I'm going to go back to, so it says Anders. Okay, so this is the hash of the name Anders, all lowercase. It starts with 19EA, right? Okay, so if I delete that and I go again, type Anders again, you can see it starts with 19EA, the same exact hash. In that sense, it's a digital fingerprint of this data. Whatever data is here, every time you type exactly the same data, you get exactly the same hash. And I can type anything I want. So you can have nothing, like this, E3B0, that's the hash of nothing. Or you could type tons and tons of stuff. As a matter of fact, you could put like the Library of Congress in here and you would get a hash. And the interesting thing about it is, regardless of if there's a tiny amount of information, no information, or the entire Library of Congress, you're always going to get a hash that is this long, this many characters. You're not going to be able to pre-guess what this is. You kind of have to put the Library of Congress in here to figure out what the hash is, but you'll always get exactly the same hash regardless of how many times you put exactly the same information in. So what I'm going to do is extend this idea of a hash into something that we're going to call a block. All right, so let's take a look at a block.
Okay, so a hash function that we are interested in is we call it a function because multiple inputs, there is a possibility that multiple inputs can give us the same output. So it's still as a function, right? When multiple inputs can give us the same output, it's a function. But the ideal hash function that we are looking for is one-to-one mapping, is going to give us one-to-one mapping. So we don't want multiple inputs give us the same hash function value. It is possible, but for this SHA-256 hash function, the possibility that we're going to get two inputs being mapped to the same hash function values more than 1 over 10 to the power of 40. So, I mean, less than 1 over 10 to the power of 40. So if you 1 over 1 and then 40 zeros. So it's so small possibility that we are saying that for Bitcoin application, two inputs giving us the same hash function values almost impossible. That's one thing. That's very important. Okay. Second thing is, when we get hash function value, it is impossible to find out what the data was. When I give you the hash function value to you, it's impossible to find what the data was. Okay, because again, he just demonstrated that regardless of the size of the input, the hash function value is always 256 characters long. Okay, so that's why we are using this hash function as part of the Bitcoin application. And the puzzle, later on he's going to talk about the puzzle that we are going to be trying to solve, because we cannot find the data, because we cannot go back from hash function value to data. We are going to try to find a hash function value which is going to satisfy a certain criteria. That is the puzzle that we are going to solve later on.
So this is a block, and it's exactly like the hash. It's just that that data section I've broken out now into 3 sections. One called block. This is just some kind of a number. This is block number 1. A nonce, which is just yet another number. We'll go into what that is in a second. And then just some more data, just very similarly to the way that we had it before. However, the hash of this, which includes all of this information up here, is down here, and it begins with 4 zeros. You see that? Okay, that's a relatively unusual hash. You know, most of them are not really going to start with 4 zeros like that, but this one happens to. And because it does, totally arbitrarily, I'm going to say that this block is signed. Okay? So what would happen if I were to change any one piece of this information? Let's say if I were to type something here, right? The hash is going to change. And what's the chance of, if I type letters, this hash is going to start with 4 zeros? Pretty low. It's probably not, right? So let's see what happens when I do that. I'm just going to say hi. Oh, look at that, right? This hash does not start with 4 zeros. And so the big background here has turned red. So now you know that this block with this information in it is not a valid or a signed block. Okay? And that's where this nonce comes in. This nonce is just a number that you can set to try to find a number that fits so that this hash starts with 4 zeros again. All right, so how do we do that? Well, let's start with 1. Does that start with, no, it's 3, 2, 7, that's not 1. So let's try 2. FF now. 3, 4, 5, 6. You get the idea. Like I could sit here, there's one that starts with a 0. I could sit here all day typing these numbers and trying to figure out one that actually is going to hash out to something that starts with 4 zeros. Going to take a long time. So here I have my little mine button. I'm sure you've been wondering what happens if I press that. So what's going to happen when I press this mine button is it's going to run through all the numbers from 1 all the way up to try to find one where the hash starts with 4 zeros. And this process is called mining. Let's do it right now. So now it's checking all of the numbers from 1 all the way up. Whoop, there. Now it's stopped at 59,396. And that one just happens to hash out to something that starts with 4 zeros. And it satisfies my little definition of what a signed block is. Okay, so that's a block. Now, can you tell me what a blockchain is? It's probably just a chain of these blocks. Well, how do you
Okay, so one thing that I just want to remind you guys, you see the data says hi. When you change that data, so the important thing is given the data. So I'm going to give you data, right? And then I'm going to give you how many zeros I want to see as the hash function, okay, at the beginning of the hash function. So I'm going to give you data first, and I'm going to tell you how many zeros I want to see at the beginning of the hash function. Then you are going to begin mining to find that nonce value, which is going to give you, say in this case, 4 zeros given data. So that's what he did, right? He first typed hi, and then for this data, he mined for the nonce value, which is 59,396. And that satisfied 4 zeros. In this case, the target difficulty level is finding a hash function value which is less than, which begins with 4 zeros. Again, actually, it's going to be less than something, but it begins with 4 zeros.
Put them together. Let's do that. All right, so here's my blockchain. I've block number 1. It has some kind of a nonce just like before. There's some data area to it, but then it has this previous. And here it's a bunch of zeros. Let's roll forward. So this is block 2 and block 3 and 4. This blockchain has 5 blocks on it, right? The previous here starts with 00 AE8, right? Is this number, AE8. And then this previous, B90 is this one over here, B90. So you can see that each block points backwards to the one before it. And you remember that first block over here, there actually is no previous, so it's just a bunch of zeros. It's actually just a fake number. Okay, so just like we did before, what happens if I change some information here? Right? It's going to change the hash of this block and it's going to invalidate it, right? Well, let's try that. So I'm going to type hi again. Sure enough, that block is invalid. All right, just as we assumed. But what would happen? I'm going to fix that now. We'll go back to something that worked. What would happen if I change something in this block? Right? It's going to change this hash, but this hash gets copied up to this previous, so it's gonna change this one too, right? So it should break both blocks. So let me try typing high in there, and sure enough, right? So we can go back as far as we want, you know, to some point in the past and break that block, and it'll break all the blocks since then. Everything before is still green, but this one is red. So if I wanted to, you know, change something in this blockchain, I could just go over to block number 5 right here. We could change it. I'll put high, and then we could remine it, you know, and pick a different nonce. We'll do that right now, and we could essentially alter the chain. So we've done it, so that we should be good now, right? All right, well, what happens if I go back in time to here and I break it here? Now I have to mine this block, which will pick a nonce that makes this block hash out to 4 zeros, if we can find one. Sometimes it takes a while because it's got to run through a lot of them. There it is. It found one at 138,000. All right, but this one is still broken because although this one starts with 4 zeros, adding the 4 zeros with different stuff up here still makes this block hash out incorrectly. So I also have to mine this block. All right. And that takes some amount of time. That one was a little bit quicker. And then I have to mine this block to fix it. All right, so what we're showing here is that if I go and change this last block, all I have to do is remine this block. If I go way back in time to back here and I make a change like that, I'm going to have to mine this one, this one, this one, and this one. So the more blocks that go by, the more blocks in the past that we are, the harder and harder and harder it is to make a change. And so that's how a blockchain is going to resist mutation, resist change. Okay, so now, like you know, I did. If I do this in this block here, you can see that I've changed it to high and I remined it. Blah blah blah. How would I know that my blockchain has been remined? All right, let's take a look at that.
Okay, so this point is important. That is, again, heart of the blockchain technology. So we understood how we create a chain of blocks, and then we understood what mining means, and we understood how difficult it is to make a change, a modification in one of the blocks. If you make a modification, you have to mine each block again from the point where you made the modification, from the block that you made a modification on, onwards until the end of the chain. You need to mine them one by one again to form a verified block, chain of verified blocks. So, but it is still possible to make modifications and mutations on blocks. As you see, the more go you backwards, the more difficult it will be, but still it is possible to make a change or modification or mutation in one of the blocks. Now, we want this be impossible. We want to make this impossible. We want to make that, even though theoretically you can make changes in previous blocks, so we're going to make it extremely difficult for it to make this change accepted universally. So that is the next thing. And that is at the heart of the blockchain technology, which is, we talked about P2P network.
Hit this little distributed thing. So now we have a distributed blockchain. It looks exactly like the last blockchain, okay, up to 5. But this is peer A, the first peer. If we go down here, you can see here's peer B, and it happens to have an exact copy of the blockchain. There's actually also a peer C down here, right? And this could go on forever. There's many, many peers out on the internet, and they all have a complete copy of the blockchain. So in this case, if I look at this hash, it's 00E4B, all right? If I go down to this one, I notice it also has E4B. If I go down to this last one, it has E4B, so they must be identical. And I'm going to demonstrate that by going here and typing something. I'll type high again, and then I will remine this block. And I've got some other number, and now it's put some other number up here. So I should be able to mine this block. Okay, now all the chains are green, right? They're all green. However, this chain says the last hash is E4B. The bottom one says that too, E4B. And this middle one here says 4CAE. So I know just by glancing at this one little hash that something is wrong in this blockchain, even though all of the hashes start with 4 zeros. I know that this one is different. And it's different because I have two. It's essentially 2 against 1. We're a little democracy here, right? This guy argues that it's E4B. This guy argues that it's 4CE, it's 4CA, and this one is E4B. So E4B wins. So that's how a completely distributed copy, having a copy on many different computers, they can all very quickly see if all of the blocks are identical. And remember, blockchains can have, 400,000 or 500,000 blocks very easily. So rather than checking through all of them, all you really have to do is look at the hash of the most recent one, and you can see that if anything in the past, anything way back here was altered, you can tell by looking at this at the last block in this in the chain.
So a very
this is a blockchain demo.
A very simple question, right? If I ask you, what is the easiest way to investigate whether a modification or alteration or mutation happened in any of the blocks in a blockchain? What is the easiest way to find out if there is any change happened, right? So you can, what kind of an answer can you give to this? What is the easiest way? And by the way, I lost the, anyone? I'm repeating the question.
When it can,
yeah, go ahead.
Professor, we can look for any changes that have made that have been made in the past blocks. Like if you feel like there's a problem in the present block, you can look at the blocks that were like before that. If there were any changes to that, any problems or something like that.
So that is one approach. So we can check all the way back and then see if the any change happened. But how can you detect if a change has happened in a block? What changes when you make a change in the block? What actually changes?
The hash number.
Then, so the next question is, it makes sense to go back in the blockchain and then see if hash function values were changed. It makes sense. But does it make sense to go back and then check this for each block? Or is there any easier way of checking whether this blockchain was altered?
We just need to check the last one.
We simply check its last hash function value and compare it with other nodes. So we have multiple nodes in the network. Each has a copy of the blockchain, right? So because any change you make in the previous blocks will cause a change in the last hash value. So if you compare the last hash value of the last block in the chain across the nodes, you're going to see that majority of the nodes have the same hash value, whereas say this blockchain is different. That means something is different. If you are looking at the same block, so 500th block across all the nodes, right? You are looking at the same block. I'm not saying end of the chain. I'm saying the same block, 500th block. You are comparing up to 500, whether any change has happened on the blockchain. Okay, so the next thing is actually, it's going to be related to what we're going to talk next today, but let us complete this. So I'm going to come back to, we are going to talk about tokens in a minute, but
what we really want is a token. So let's do a token on our blockchain. All right, now look at this. So I have this token just totally arbitrarily. I'm calling these, I guess, dollars, right? So we have $25 from Darcy to Bingley.
Now you see that data part is actually a set of transactions. Now we are using the blockchain technology for some application. Here, our application is we keep track of transactions.
$4.27 go from Elizabeth to Jane. You get the idea. It's basically there's all these transactions that are happening. And I've just replaced the data with these transactions. And just like we saw before, so there's multiple blocks here. This one has more transactions. It doesn't matter how many transactions there are. There can be many, or there can be few, or none. If we keep going forward in here, just like we saw before, if we go down, we notice we have all these other copies of the same blockchain, right? So now here's where the immutability is important. If I change something back here, you'll notice that this is, A7FC, blah, blah, blah. It's something else. So it's something different than what's down here. So in this way, I mean, it's very important that if I were to go back in time and change some value that we would notice. It's very important with money that you don't lose track. And that's the whole point of using a blockchain here. This is the whole point of resisting any kind of modifications, of things that have happened in the past. So that's the reasoning behind using a blockchain to remember tokens. Now, one thing I would mention here is that we're not listing, Darcy has $100 and he's giving 25 of it to Bingley. The only thing we're saying is Darcy gives 25 to Bingley. We're not.
Okay, so pay attention to this part because this is part of what we're going to talk today. So Darcy is giving $25 to Bingle. It's Bingle, right? So, but this is the first block. You notice that? This is the first block. And Darcy, how do we know Darcy has $25? So this is the first block. So who gave $25 to Darcy? So that's the problem here, right? We have to fix this. Otherwise, if we know that Darcy had $100, she gave $25 to Bingle, and then later on might have given to other people if still has enough money to give. But we should have some record telling us that Darcy had $100 at the beginning, right? So these blocks chain to each other using a certain function to verify the block. Those are all parts of the blockchain technology. The kind of the hash function we are using, like SHA-256, this data that we are holding here, like list of transactions as an accountant ledger, this is part of the Bitcoin application. So Bitcoin application says there must be at the beginning somewhere where Darcy or someone else should get some Bitcoins so that they can circulate this Bitcoin or distribute this Bitcoin as part of transactions to other nodes. But some Bitcoins must be coming from somewhere, right? So it's not, there must be some mechanism inserting Bitcoins to the platform. Otherwise, how is Darcy going to find this money?
Not remembering a bank account balance. We're only remembering money movements. So this begs the question, does Darcy have $25? Well, we have a problem here in this version of the blockchain. We don't actually know if Darcy has $25. So let's look at a Coinbase transaction. So if we look back here, a Coinbase, we're going to add a Coinbase transaction to our blocks. And this is very similar to what we've seen before, but we're just adding a Coinbase at the top. And what that's saying is we're going to invent $100 out of thin air and give it to Anders. Okay, there's no transactions in this block because nobody had any money previous to this. In the next block, another $100 comes out of nowhere and goes to Anders. I'm a fan. I love it, right? I'll take $100. Now we have some transactions. You can see.
Okay, question. So as you see, with each block, somebody is receiving coins out of thin air, as Anders says. So this we call it Coinbase transactions. So there are two types of transactions: normal, regular transactions like this one, like $10 given from Andrew to Sophie. This is a regular transaction, and there is only one Coinbase transaction which Anders is receiving $100. So question is, why should I give Anders $100? What makes Anders receive this money? This actually tells us the way to pump coin into this platform. Why would I give $100 to Anders? Why would I give Bitcoins to Anders out of thin air?
Is it because he found the block?
Exactly. So this is the reward he receives for mining a block. So this is how Bitcoin is pumping coins into, so Federal Reserve Bank is pumping money into the banking system, right? So if you pump too much money, if too much money is in circulation, you have inflation, you know that. You must have read this from the news or must have read about this, right? If I increase amount of money circulated in the market, then I'm going to have higher prices. That is the main reason why we have inflation, right? So here, I cannot simply pump coin for nothing, right? So I should put a system in place. And by the way, number of coins Bitcoin is going to pump into system is limited. I think by year 2041, we're going to receive Bitcoins created. But as if I'm not wrong, if it is 2041 or 2141, I'm not sure about the year. Now I might be mistaken on that. But we have limited number of Bitcoins. And these Bitcoins are pumped into system slowly, and it is tied to a condition. What is the condition? Anyone who mines a block. Mining a block means this person, the miner, is going to put together some transactions. These transactions are flowing in a transaction pool. So Ander wants to send $10 to Sophie. He just creates this transaction, but this transaction needs to be verified and be a part of a block. So this transaction will be in a pool, and Anders picked a certain number of transactions from that pool. So say in that pool, there are 10,000 transactions. Anders pulls four of them, and given these transactions, given the previous hash number, and Anders is going to look for a nonce value, which is going to satisfy the target difficulty level of the hash problem. Once that target value is satisfied, Andrews is going to be regarded as creating this block. These transactions will be verified and part of this block, and Anders will be receiving the reward, which is $100. Not only that, you don't see this, but Anders also will receive a fee from this transaction. But those fees are actually not coin-based. Those fees are part of the system. Those fees are coming from coins that were already created. But this coin here is coming from out of thin air. This coin is not part of the system yet. This coin is given by Bitcoin application to Anders from that limited repertoire of coins, right? To Anders for solving the hash puzzle problem. They're almost done with this.
See that they're all from Anders. They're all from me because I'm the only one who has any money at this point. So I'm sending 10 of my dollars to Sophie. Do I have $10? Yeah, I do. I look back and I see that this Coinbase transaction has given me 100, so I have at least 10 and I can send it on. And you add all these up and they don't go over 100, and it follows sort of a basic rule of a currency. Like you can't invent it out of thin air. You can't create money out of thin air. Its dispersion is controlled. So now if we look at this blockchain that we've created and we zip forward in time and we notice that we see that Jackson is giving Alexa $2. And so does Jackson actually have $2 to give Alexa? Well, we go back a block before and we see that Emily, who had gotten $10 from Anders, gave 10 to Jackson. And so Jackson does have the money. So we can just go backwards and find that out. And that's actually one of the benefits of having a previous here. It's easy to go backwards. We just look for the block that looks like that has that hash, and here it is right here, right? So it points to blocks back in time and allows us to trace the provenance of any coin that we want. So that's a basic blockchain, and we're running a currency on top of it. And as you know, blockchains there are many copies.
You must have noticed something here. Jackson giving $2 to some other person. Oh, I just saw that you guys posted something. So check the hash of the most recent block compared with the hash of other peers. So I didn't get was there a question here, or you just made a comment here? Tivan?
It was for the previous question.
Oh, you answered the previous question. No, I cannot see the question. Okay, anyway, so one thing you notice here is we only see money moving from one person to another, but we don't see if Anders or Jackson or Emily has that much money or how much money they have in their account. We don't have that information listed here. We're not going to have that information by them. So the transactions are distributed. Every time a transaction is happening, before we verify the transaction, we are going to go backwards and see if Anders actually had money left so that he can give money to some other peer with this transaction. So we are going to verify the transaction by going backwards and then see all the other transactions that this person made before, so that we are going to verify this person has enough in her account to give this money in this transaction to the other peer.
Everybody has a copy of it. So if we mutate this and make it $6, these go invalid. It does not agree with these blockchains down here, these copies of the same blockchain down here. So this resist tampering, which is what you want for a currency, it works very well for things that are small and transactional like this. I'll go ahead and fix that. And they're just a very efficient way to handle agreement on what has happened in the past. It's kind of this immutable history that goes down with time. So that's a basic blockchain and a token on it. We're glossing over some main points, but if you dig into...
Okay, so you can watch the video if you like later again. So let me just really fast move forward. One thing that I just wanted to bring to your attention is finding the hash value is a difficult, time-consuming, power-consuming, brute force-based problem. So what you can do is, instead of using a single processor, you can do this by making parallel processing, which is totally possible. So because at the end of the day, you are going through numbers. So what you can do is you can divide numbers into blocks, right, bins, and then each processor can check whether one of these numbers is actually the nonce value that you're looking for. So this way you can reduce the time to find, for example, here, the second device found that this is the nonce value because this number is falling in between this range. So you can do parallel processing, which what people are actually doing, right? When they're mining, we can do parallel processing, or what you can do is, again, this is the most common way. What you can do is you can create a distributed pooling of nodes in a network, and then you can use all these nodes to find the nonce value. Again, the similar way, this time you are dividing the range of the numbers across the nodes in the pool. So this might be a single user. Here we have multiple users. I'm using their devices this time. I'm dividing these bins across the users. So this is a common pool of distributed computing. You might be part of a scheme like this without knowing that. Okay, somebody might have already gotten into your computer without you knowing that. Some website that you visited before without knowing that, you might be part of a distributed computing pool. Okay, so when you are sleeping, when you are doing some other work, your computer is trying to solve a problem for someone else. Okay, now let's talk about cryptography a little bit more. Let me see. So we have some idea about what hash function does. Cryptography is a little bit different than hash functions. Hash function is a subset of cryptography. So what happens here is whatever you put as input it is encrypted so that an adversary trying to see what you are saying is not going to be able to recognize what you are saying. Important thing is whatever you encrypt, you should be able to decrypt it. So hash function is one way. Hash function is one way. Encryption, decryption is two way. Okay. So you encrypt a statement, a transaction, and you should be able to decrypt it and get back the original message. Okay. So this is different than hash function. Hash function is one way. We cannot go back from hash function value to the original message. As part of the Bitcoin application and in many other applications using the blockchain technology, we are using symmetric, but mostly, almost always, not mostly, asymmetric cryptography. So symmetric cryptography was used in some applications, early applications of more secure applications, but then we stopped using the symmetric cryptography. We are now in the age of asymmetric cryptography. Actually, this has been used for a long time, asymmetric. With symmetric cryptography, what happens is both sender and receiver have the same key. When I say key, think key as a black box. From one side, you put the message. From the other side, you receive the encrypted message. Okay, so both sides have the same box. From left, if you put the message, you get the encrypted message. From right, you put the encrypted message, you get the original message. So same box. Both sides have the same box, and then they share encrypted message. The difficulty here is if anyone gets the box in the middle, they're going to be able to know what you guys are saying. Second, because you are using the same box, it is making it more open to any security attacks because the box has to be transmitted, by the way. During the transmission, box can be also captured. But with Bitcoin applications and similar applications, we are using asymmetric cryptography. With asymmetric cryptography, we have a pair of keys, two keys, a public key and a private key. A public key, a private key. So when you want to send a message, you can encrypt your message with a private key, right? When we create these keys, we first create our private key, and from the private key, we create the public key. So when we create a pair of keys, we create the private key. There is a mathematical relationship between public key and private key, and then from the private key, we create the public key. So if I encrypt my message using my private key, whoever has the public key should be able to decrypt this message. If someone wants to send me an encrypted message, they can use my public key. Because I have the private key, I will be the only one reading that message using my private key. Please pay attention to this part. I just taught two different things. So first one, let's say I want to send a message to you guys. I am the message sender. I want to send a message to you guys. So I have a private key, and then I create my public key. I share this public key with you. Everybody has my public key. Okay, each one of you has a public key. So I'm going to encrypt my message using my private key. I'm going to send you my encrypted message. You guys are going to use my public key to decrypt my message. In order for you to decrypt my message, you need to have my public key. If you want to send a message to me, that's the next slide actually, digital certificates. That is the next slide one. If you want to send me a message, You are going to use my public key because you guys have my public key. You're going to use my public key to encrypt the message and release the message. So you guys all can have the same message. Say, Hejin sending a message to me. She encrypts this message using my public key. You guys can have access to this message, encrypted message, but you will not be able to understand it. Only I will be understanding that message because I have the private key. So Hejin is sending a message about one of the students, a grade of one of the students. Everybody will have the access to this encrypted message, but I will be the only one who will be able to decrypt the message because I have the private key for that public key. All right. So this also brings the digital signatures. So nowadays, right? So when we are sending a message, we are using digital signatures. I just wanted to bring this again to your attention. So this is used as part of, again, Bitcoin application. So what is digital signature? We are using, again, public key and private key. So I am signing a document. I have my private. I'm sending a message to you guys. So what makes it certain for you that this message was actually sent by me? I want to certify this message so that anyone who receives my message will know that this message is actually from me. For that, I'm going to use a digital certificate, a digital signature. Again, remember, you guys have my public key. I have my private key. So I am sending the message. This is the message I'm sending. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this message into a hash function. Now you guys know what hash function does. It gives me a hash function, encoded hash function value. Then I'm going to encrypt this hash function value with my private key. Remember, I only have this key. And this is the signature. This is my signature. Now, my signature is the encrypted message, and message is the hash function value of the data or the message that I'm sending. So this is my signature. Now I'm going to put my signature next to my data. So this time data is open to everybody. So you can read the message. The problem is you want to make sure that this message is coming from me. It is like signature, right? So I can write any document. How do you know that I actually, wrote that document? I owe you $100. How can you make sure that whatever I write on the paper, I owe you $100. How can you make sure that that document is actually valid? If I put my signature on it, then that document will become valid. That means I actually certify that I owe you $100. So you can use that document to prove that this person owes me $100. So how do you know this message is coming from a certain person? I'm going to receive the message with the digital signature. What is that digital signature? Hashed data encrypted by the private key. That is a signature. Okay, so you guys received my digitally signed message. So you know what the data is, you know the signature. So it's coming with two pieces, the message, and here there is no problem with reading the message. We want to verify that message is coming from this person or not. So this is the message, this is the signature. So you guys have my public key. So what you're going to do is you're going to hash the message. You remember what hash function does? Whatever you put, it's giving you some number, some unmeaningful number. And then you put my signature, decrypt it using my public key. So the decrypted signature is going to give you the same hash function value that when you put your message into the hash function. Okay, so the hash function value coming from this hash function and the value that you receive by decrypting my signature, if they are the same, then you certify that, okay, this message is actually sent by this person. So this is the idea behind digital signatures. I hope this part is also clear. Now, with Bitcoin, we are using this asymmetric cryptography. Okay, so again, the same example that's in the context of Bitcoin. So you are sending a message to your investors. It's a good time to buy stock. So you want to send this message encrypted so that only your customers are going to understand this message, right? So you are encrypting this message using your private key, and the investment letter will be decrypted by your public key if your customers have your public key. So this is again another example. Same thing is happening with the blockchain. In this case, Bitcoin application. So we are encrypting a message, and this message is decrypted by the private key. So what happens is, if I want to send you money, Bitcoin, okay, I want to send Bitcoin to you. You have your Bitcoin wallet. I want to transfer Bitcoin to your wallet. How can I do that? So you're gonna give me your wallet number. That number actually contains your public key, Now I create the transaction for transferring Bitcoin to your wallet. When I make that create this transaction is encrypted using your public key. Remember, you also have your private key. Now I sent this transaction out. Anybody can have this transaction now, but only you will be able to open this transaction and get the Bitcoin because you have the private key. So this is how transactions are actually, Bitcoins are actually distributed as transactions across the nodes. Okay, this is how I can transfer Bitcoin from one point to another. All right. Any questions up to this point or anything you would like to add?
I